Avatar: The Last Airbender established clear cultures and traditions for each nation. Aang had a deep respect for the traditional ways of the Air Nation and believed in the sovereignty of the four nations. Aang steadfastly clung to the past and tried to preserve a culture he felt had been destroyed in the 100 years since he had been in the iceberg. The Legend of Korra is about breaking down tradition and ushering in a new era. Every villain we see in the series wants to change the world in some specific way. Amon wanted equality through persecution. Unalaq wanted spiritual reconnection through deconstruction. Zaheer wanted peace through chaos. And Kuvira wanted order and stability through power and submission. Here's where they would all probably fit on the political compass. Feel free to discuss the nuances in the comments. While The Last Airbender focused on finding balance within the elements, The Legend of Korra seeks to find balance within major political ideologies. While Aang focused on bringing the four nations together, Korra focused on fundamentally changing the world. The Legend of Korra is quite overt in the way it portrays balance. Toph explains the whole thing. Non-benders were always at a disadvantage, which is important to acknowledge, but taking away the abilities of benders was too extreme. Unalaq may have been justified in opening the spirit portals, but his ambition to become the Dark Avatar was taking his spiritual aspirations too far. The Earth Queen was oppressive and needed to step down, but Zaheer removing all leaders and enacting anarchy is completely unreasonable. It left a power vacuum which Kuvira capitalized on. Kuvira is the opposite of Zaheer. Her attempts to establish order and stability seemed altruistic, but this led to total dictatorship and oppression. Through the villains, Korra tries to balance between all of the political ideologies and usher in a new world. In this new world of change, tradition is dying. If you read the Rift comic, you'd see both Aang and Katara showing some dissatisfaction with how things have changed. Industrialization brought with it machines that could do the work of bending. They question Satoru as to why they would want to replace bending with machines and comment on how much more elegant bending is. This is my own headcanon, but I don't think Aang ever fully accepted the way the world changed. This is consistent with his character as he was initially upset with the Northern Air Temple being industrialized in The Last Airbender. In The Legend of Korra, only a few select still hold these traditional values, most notably Unalaq and Tenzin. Tenzin has an unhealthy fixation on his father Aang's legacy. On the surface, this may seem cute. If you recall, in the comics, Sokka called the gross feeling he would get from Aang and Katara's love the Oogies. Knowing Sokka, he probably carried this name into adulthood. Kid Tenzin likely picked up on the name and it became synonymous with Aang and Katara's love. Tenzin later names his bison Oogie. Therefore, his bison is named after the love between his parents. This, however, is symptomatic of a larger problem in the Aang family. A lot of the respect Aang had for tradition and for the previous generations was passed on to Tenzin. In The Last Airbender, Aang felt like he had a responsibility to restore, uphold, and maintain an entire culture of airbenders. It was up to him to recover and re-establish the Air Nation. Therefore, having a child gifted in airbending was imperative to pass on his heritage. Of course, it was possible that his airbending genes would skip a generation and manifest in later generations, but that would have been a huge gap. Aang needed a child gifted in airbending to pass down the airbending teachings, principles, and traditions firsthand. It isn't too far-fetched, therefore, to assume Aang would obsessively look out for airbending in his children. Bumi, his firstborn, was a non-bender who also had a fixation on making his father proud. He thought he was inherently a failure because he had no airbending skills. Even after Aang's death, Bumi felt pressure to make up for whatever failings he felt he still had. I can only imagine how rigorously Aang tested airbending skills in him as a child, as there isn't really a science as to knowing whether someone is a bender or not. Aang must have been so disappointed, and that disappointment is what Bumi is still living with. Sometime later, his sister, Kaya, was born as a waterbender, but not an airbender. Another disappointment. After Kaya, finally, Tenzin, a gifted airbender, was born. The entire history, culture, and practice of airbending was now entrusted into Tenzin. He had the responsibility of ensuring the future of the Air Nation. This was exactly the position Aang was in. The only difference, of course, is that Tenzin is not the Avatar, and so all of his time is devoted to functioning as a traditional airbending monk. His position as the only other airbender must have earned him preferential treatment from his father, which caused some family problems down the line. Nothing about Aang's lifestyle was entrusted into Bumi and Kaya. Not his air nomad philosophy, not his vegetarian diet, or anything. And as we come to find out, they didn't want to be left out of their family's unique lifestyle despite not being airbenders. They felt that their father neglected them in favor of Tenzin. No one was hit harder with this neglect than Bumi, who says onto Aang's statue, "I'm sorry I wasn't the airbender you hoped for me to be, but I tried my best to keep the world safe. I hope you're proud." Seeing how the children are as adults, we can assume that Bumi likely spent a majority of his childhood with Sokka, who, like him, had no bending abilities. Kaya would have spent her childhood learning from her mother Katara, and Tenzin would have spent this time with their father Aang. This is all important, but let's get back to Tenzin and the changing culture. The cultural change in the world during the time of Korra affected no one more than Tenzin. As discussed in my friend Hoodie from Kato's video, in the new age of Korra as the Avatar, the Air Nation had to evolve. With Tenzin now spearheading the Air Nation, he had to change. It's this obsession with traditions and rules that I believe made Tenzin unable to enter the spirit world or unlock unassisted flight. Tenzin limited himself to his strict discipline and teachings. To command the power of flight, one must let go of such ideas. Of the notable antagonists able to enter the spirit world, both Zaheer and Unalaq were far more free thinkers than Tenzin. Perhaps Tenzin was too bogged down by rules and principles rather than his own insights to enter the spirit world. As explained, Aang was not the perfect father, and so for Tenzin to change, he had to first acknowledge the shortcomings of his father. After a heated argument with his siblings and a heartfelt discussion with his daughter Ikki, Tenzin realizes just how similar their sibling relationships are. Both him and Ikki seem to be living in their own world and out of touch with their siblings. Tenzin apologizes to his siblings soon after. In the fog of lost souls, Tenzin found himself directly confronting his uncertainties. Aang appears to him and tells Tenzin to stop emulating someone else's life and to be his own person. Tenzin's moment of realization causes his literal and psychological fog to dissipate. Tenzin realizes his father wasn't perfect and takes him off his unattainable apex, humanizing him and recognizing the flaws in his ways. Poetically, Tenzin came to this realization through his young children, the future of the Air Nation. In Book 3, the Air Nomads come back, and this is the time for Tenzin to now do what his father couldn't. When training the new Air Nomads, he tries to teach them in the traditional ways of peaceful meditation and spiritual stories, the same way he was likely taught. Ultimately, this method doesn't work. He then tries to change things by going to the opposite extreme, ushering a firebending-esque militance to his training. This doesn't work either. He had to find a balance between the two and adopt some of Bumi's charisma for optimal leadership. Bumi's general personality did not gel well with the traditional airbending culture. But, as a show of his development, Tenzin accepts some of Bumi's ways and assures him that he is part of the Air Nation. A respectable end to his character arc. Enter Zaheer, the leader of the Red Lotus. Airbenders are peaceful and calm. Zaheer wants chaos. Airbenders never kill. One of Zaheer's defining moments was his cold, grim use of airbending to take away the air in the lungs of the Earth Queen. Even analyzing the way Tenzin and Zaheer fight, Tenzin has a level of tranquility and respect for the art of airbending, whereas Zaheer is ruthless. He airbends with a brutality usually associated with firebenders. In their fight, Zaheer used powerful kicks and strikes, whereas Tenzin's style emphasized his coordination, balance, and finesse with the art. The Air Nomads are characterized by their desire to be free. Zaheer takes that philosophy to its worst extreme by trying to initiate anarchy. Zaheer shows the potential negative side of change. Zaheer is certainly someone who had little if any attachment to traditions, but the change that he promoted was too radical. Zaheer shows that some traditions are harmful, but radically changing things too much can be just as bad. Tenzin shows how upholding traditions is important, but changing with the times is inevitable. Both must be handled carefully. The cap to Tenzin's arc comes at the end of Book 3. This was a beautiful ceremony with his daughter Jinora receiving her tattoos. Throughout the show, Jinora demonstrated proficient airbending skills, had faithful knowledge of airbending culture and stories, followed their rituals, and even had a stronger connection to the spirits than Tenzin ever did. Tenzin was initially repulsed by the idea of her receiving tattoos when Jinora brought it up, and the fact that Kai was the one who persuaded her didn't help. He wasn't a model airbender. But throughout the season, Jinora constantly proved her value as an airbending master, and after using her Aang-like ingenuity to create an airbending tornado to suck in Zaheer and trap him, Tenzin had no choice but to acknowledge not only her daughter's airbending prowess, but her skills as a leader. What's more important is that Jinora is the youngest airbender to receive her tattoos, eclipsing the previous owner, Avatar Aang. With this came another change that had to do with how the Air Nation was structured. No longer are they detached from the world. Unlike their ancestors, they will now serve people of all nations, working wherever there's corruption or discord instead of keeping to themselves in meditation. They will keep their nomadic roots, but are now a force of change and peace in the world, and not just keeping to themselves in their own temples. The Airbenders changed, but did so appropriately, not taking it too far. It's inspiring how selfless Tenzin was. It showed above all that he was most interested in advancing the air nomads, and not keeping power to himself. He was humble. Even among the most vehement Korra detractors, there tends to be some consensus that at least Tenzin is a well-written character. His development isn't too aggressive, but it's still visible and carries with it meaningful change while teaching important lessons. Part of me wishes Tenzin was a flat, wise character like Uncle Iroh, but Tenzin is instead a flawed character who learns to change into the world instead of trying to change the world. I would argue that he's exactly what the show and the world of Avatar needed.